not admitted without parents or guardian. Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian. Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian.
Good evening, fans of fantastic films, and welcome once again to the Drive-In Asylum double feature. I'm Bill Van Ryn, editor and publisher of fanzine Drive-In Asylum. We have a very special guest this evening, Pat Cardi from Horror High. The star, Vernon himself, is with us to talk live with us about making this movie. How are you, Pat?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am great. You know, this is a fantastic moment for me because I've been a fan of this movie since I was very small. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, we got a bunch of fans.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for showing up. And if you do us a favor and click the like button, more people will be able to find the broadcast. And if you really like us, share. Pat, you've had a pretty interesting career in films that started when you were very young. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I actually started working. I went into the working area when I was 9 years old. I started by washing dishes at a restaurant and hanging out in Pasadena. And for part of that time in the third grade, I wandered around Pasadena. I used to go to every movie theater in town. And sorry about the dogs. And somehow talk to managers into letting me go and see just about every picture that was out back then. And I found the Pasadena Playhouse and a group that were, involved in making a low budget film. And I talked them into giving me a role in the film, and they did. And from that, I got a Screen Actors Guild card, and my parents were very confused, but very happy that I'd found a way of doing what I always talked about doing as a child, that I wanted to be on TV and the movies. And from there, it just, got an agent. It just turned out to be a very good period of time in my life where I worked a lot on TV shows. And,
it's so interesting that you just managed to make that happen, and you make it sound so easy.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of happy accidents, For instance, my brother got in a lot of trouble in the school we were going to, so he got kicked out. It was a Catholic school in Pasadena. So he got kicked out of school, and my dad took me home at the same time. And basically I took that as, oh, good, I don't have to come back either. And so instead of putting me in another school, my dad was pretty simple about it. He just dropped me off and said, go in there and tell him you need to go to school here. And so instead of doing that, because I was intimidated, I just, I said, no, I'm off to find my acting dream. I'm going to go to these theaters and figure it out. And so eventually I put two and two together and wound up at the Pasadena Playhouse, and the rest is history.
I guess it was easier to get away with something like that in the time period. I mean, now people would be breathing down your neck, asking where you belonged.
Well, nobody called. I mean, the Catholic school figured Dad wasn't going to take me back, and I never signed into another school, so nobody knew to call. And my brothers and I were all kind of rascals. We used to get in trouble a lot. Usually I didn't get caught, but I finally had to get caught when I told them I have a part in a movie. And they were they were like, how did this happen? Well, I've been doing this and this. Well, how did you do all that? Were you doing it after school? Yeah, some of it.
In lieu of school.
Yeah, well, it was a good education. Look what I did. I got myself into a career.
Yeah, isn't that what school is supposed to do?
That's exactly it. I was just taking drama full time, My family was drama anyway. So.
You worked a lot in television, but the first couple roles that you got were as small parts in actual Hollywood features, and you worked with some pretty big names.
I should have a list of the names because Youngblood Hawk, the second thing that I did, was a film that was directed by Delmer Daves, who did Spencer's Mountain. He may not be as well known as other directors, but he was a regular sort of company film director for Warner Brothers. And his second unit director was the director of our first movie, Quick and the Dead. The Quick and the Dead was a film about the Italian guerrilla underground in World War II. Not to be confused with the Western that was made like 20 years after that. But The Quick and the Dead did really well because Warner Brothers bought the picture and made it their B film that went out with everything. They had all their A films that went out with The Quick and the Dead. So a lot of people from back then, from 59, 60, remember that. I think it says that it came out in 63, but I saw it in 1960 for the first time.
And Victor French was the big star in that movie.
That's right. Victor French was in it at the time. He called himself Ed French. And I don't know that he'd done anything before that, actually. I don't think he even had a SAG card. But he was in it. And then Majel Barrett was in it, who later was on quite a lot of Star Trek episodes. And she married Gene Roddenberry, who you'll remember was the creator of Star Trek. But that didn't get me on Star Trek. I wish it had. There's actually more fan events for Star Trek than there are for anything else I did.
Yeah, I mean, if the camera happened to pan past you on Star Trek, you can go to a convention and have a whole.
I know. As a matter of fact, the last convention that I was signing autographs at, William Shatner was sitting right across from me, signing autographs, and he had a line going all the way outside the venue, and I was hoping I'd get some of the fall off from that, but I think after him, then you got to go get an autograph from Barbara Eden.
Oh, wow.
But it was good to see Barbara there. Her husband was Mike Ansara,
right?
Who was in, he did a lot of films, and he was on TV. He was always the bad guy. He was always a bad, Middle Eastern, chic kind of guy. And but he was a great guy. He played my dad in Now Miguel, which is like probably the third or fourth film that I was in. And I played Miguel in that film. And Mike and my dad got to know each other pretty well. So we were invited over to their house for dinner a couple of times. And it was, that was kind of nice. But the first time I saw Barbara Eden, we were visiting the set of I Dream of Jeannie. And Michael was there and he said, just go knock on the door over there. I knocked on the door and Jeannie opened up the door and I couldn't even talk. I mean, I was just like, oh.
I would have fainted dead away.
I was starstruck. And because of my age and because I'd already been around such movie people, I'd never been starstruck before. I always felt like I was one of them. But when I saw Barbara Eden, I didn't know what to say.
That's on a whole new level, I think.
Yeah. And she didn't know who I was. She was like, can I help you, little boy? Oh, can you ever?
She's still out there doing conventions too, at least, before COVID. Yeah. She was making.
Yeah, that's where I saw her at that last convention.
I was really disappointed because I work in a theater, and this was maybe about 10 years ago before Larry Hagman passed away. And
right.
Larry and Barbara were supposed to do, they were going to appear at our theater doing love letters that play love letters. And I was really excited because I thought maybe I might get to meet both of them. But Larry had to bail on it. I'm not sure what the reason was. And then the whole thing just got canned, unfortunately.
Larry and I were buddies.
Yeah.
I actually worked with him on Dallas for 2 years. This is after my acting, I became a craft service guy. And I worked on a lot of TV shows, a lot more movies, came into contact with a lot more famous people. There's a Now Miguel.
There's you from Now Miguel. Yeah, I was trying to get it up while you were talking about it, but I couldn't find it.
We could talk more about it. But
no, anyway, talk about Larry. I want to hear about Larry.
I was the craft service guy for 2 seasons on Dallas, and Larry was just a good-natured guy. We had a lot of fun. He liked to tease people. He liked to play pranks on them, and a lot of times he'd use me to help get his prank off, because nobody would know. We're sitting in the back talking about things, and he'd say, "Here, I need you to do this or that," and we'd play a prank on Duffy or on Victoria Principal, that type of thing. Victoria had a lot of pranks played on her. She was kind of a different person.
You told me about a really funny prank that you played on another co-star of yours.
Are you talking about David Jensen?
Yes. I think so.
At that point, I was in junior high, and I was a guest star with Kurt Russell on an episode of The Fugitive. I don't think I sent any pictures of that over, but when I was going to junior high, I was also a member of the junior high newspaper, and I was a writer on the paper. So I thought I'd score, a big one for the school paper by getting an interview with David Jansen. So I waited for him to come out of his dressing room, which he didn't do very often. Sometimes stars would just not be anywhere near the set unless they were actually in the scene. And so when he finally came to the set, I told him what I wanted to do to have this interview, and he kind of just brushed me off. He was like, "Nah, I don't do that sort of thing," and he walked away. And so then there was a PR guy on the set, and I said, "Could you talk to David for me, because I'd like to interview him for my school paper. It really put a feather in my cap, if I could do that." And the PR guy said, "No, Larry would never do that. He's not going to do it." I keep saying Larry, I mean David.
David.
So I asked him again on the set, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, could you leave me alone?" I was like, "Oh, okay, all right." Now the director of the show was the director of the movie Superman. He just passed away recently.
Richard Donner.
And Richard Donner also had directed the pilot to It's About Time. And so I came up with an idea, and I went to Richard like second or third day on the set, and I had made this phony firecracker. I had a bunch of underwater demolition fuse that I bought out of the back of Popular Mechanics, which is kind of funny because you could send $1 and get 50 feet of underwater demolition fuse. But right next to that ad, you could buy a rifle, which is what that particular episode was about. Young people just buying a rifle and going off and shooting their friends. And anyway, I had this fuse, and I made a phony firecracker. It looked like an M80, and I stuck the fuse in it, and I showed it to Donner. I said, "Look, I want to go fool David." And he goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm just going to light this. I'm going to stand by his door and light this." And he laughed, and he said, "Okay, you do that." He goes, "But wait until you get my signal." So after a little while, I looked across the room, and there he was. He was like, "Okay, go do it." And so I went up to his door, and I lit the fuse, and I'm holding the fuse up to this thing, and it starts spurting, and I bang on the door. I go, David. And he opens the door. I said, "Let's scare the crap out of somebody. Who we throw it at? And he grabbed it out of my hand, and he threw it off onto the stage, and he pulled me inside the room, slammed the door shut, and held it and waited for the boom. And all he heard was the entire crew laughing. And he opened the door, and there was the whole crew. Donner had set it up so that everybody was in on it. And I stepped out, and they gave me an applaud, and I bowed down to them. And David literally pushed me out the door, like, you're out of here. And he slammed the door, and he went back in. So he didn't think it was funny at all. But his PR guy came to me a little while later, like an hour later. The PR guy came to me and said, "David wants to see you." And I said, "What does he want?" He goes, "I don't know. David wants to see you." So I opened the door, and he said, come here, come get your freaking interview.
That's one way to get through to somebody.
But Donner was a great prankster too. And if you know the history of he and Mel Gibson, he and Mel used to play tricks on each other. And Mel Gibson used to have cameras set up for all the tricks that they played. And they literally had a half-hour special on TV using all this high-8 footage he shot on the set of a recent Lethal Weapon movie. But he was a great guy. He was excellent to work with and just friendly as can be.
Well, that's a magical time for all this stuff to happen to you when you were a kid, you know, and you got a lot of work on television. One of the strangest things that you did was this television show called It's About Time, a Sherwood Schwartz film or TV show that was sort of like Gilligan's Island before Gilligan's Island.
After Gilligan's Island, actually.
After Gilligan's Island, that's right.
Yeah, it was Gilligan's did 2 seasons, and then when they went to their 3rd season, we came on.
Yeah,
that year. And It's About Time. It was about these 2 astronauts who you see there. The one on the left is Frank Letter, and the one on the right is Jack Mulaney. And then in the back is my mom and dad. Were Imogene Coca and Joey Ross, and Mary Grace played my sister, and that's me playing Breer. I played the young son on the show, and I was right at that point. I was like 14, going on 15, and I was right at the point where I was getting a growth spurt, and my voice was changing, and so when we had to slip back to the 20th century in order to keep the contract going. After 12 shows, when we took a hiatus in between, and when the cave people came back to the 20th century in the 13th show, my voice had completely changed. So I was getting letters from people saying, "Does traveling forward in time make your voice change?"
And you answered yes.
Yeah. Now, as you see, Mary Grace is there. I was like totally falling for her.
I can't imagine why.
She was very nice person. And Mary Grace came from a very well-to-do family. Her mother was the heiress to the oleo fortune, which is like the margarine. You know, any margarine ever made, she got a percentage. And her dad was the president of President Shipping Lines and I forget, Matson Shipping Lines, a couple of other companies like that. So she drove a Maserati to work every day.
Wow.
And that's Mike Mazurki, who played Klon. He was the big dumb guy in the tribe, and a wonderful man. My dad had known him years before, but he and I and my dad and Cliff Norton used to go to Rams and USC football games together during this time. So yeah, I got to hang out with a lot of cool people. Our show lasted 1 season. It's About Time. And it probably would have lasted more if the president of the network had liked the show, but he didn't. He hated it. We had a hard time, like any new show, we had a hard time getting it off the ground in the ratings. But when summer came, our ratings went through the roof because we were against Disney's Wonderful World of Color, which CBS couldn't do anything to get through that time period, couldn't get any ratings. But once everybody had seen all the Disney shows, then they came back and saw us and we started getting great ratings. So they told us, you know what, this might not be canceled. You guys might be coming back. And then they couldn't get a contract with either Joey or Imogene. I can't remember which. And I think Frank was on to something else too. So the show never came back on. And also Gilligan's Island was canceled the same time we were. I don't think CBS understood what those shows were because, a lot of adults will tell you they were both just silly, kind of slapstick comedy shows. But the thing they didn't get about what Sherwood Schwartz does, and I think Brady Bunch, which is probably the diamond in his ring, those were shows that you could watch with your kids and not be afraid something's going to go wrong or somehow it's going to poison them. There's not going to be any curse words. There's no talk about sex. There's nothing political about them. These are just the shows, and basically you sit there and if you're really into your kids, like I was into my kids, you watch them watching the show. When I went to a movie with them, I got to know movies a different way because I'd watch what they laughed at. I'd always chuckle with them, and then we all enjoyed a great film that I might not have ever seen if I hadn't had kids. And that's what the Brady Bunch and It's About Time and Gilligan's Island were. They were shows that families could watch together.
There was something else you did right around the same time. I can't remember if it was before or after It's About Time, but you were in a William Castle film called Let's Kill Uncle.
Right. At the time, I knew William Castle mainly from 13 Ghosts, and I know he had other films out, but it wasn't so easy to get to films that had already passed through the theaters back then. Mm-hmm. Working with him was really nice. It was a great experience. Working with Mary Badham played opposite me in the show. We were the two kids who were trying to kill my uncle. And Mary was nominated for an Oscar for her role in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes, she was Scout.
She was Scout Finch in that. And then after that, she did A Twilight Zone. And after that, she was in This Property is Condemned. And I think she did another TV show too. But and of course, we were working with the great Nigel Green, who was in, a lot of films. He died a few years after that of an accidental mixture of pills to cure a cold, and he had a drink with it. And I think a lot of stars, in England in particular, met their doom that way by accident. I was a kid in this film who inherits $5 million. And I inherit this money from my parents who died in a car accident. And they sent me to live on an island with my uncle, who is a World War II veteran. And he was a hero and he was a spy. He tries any number of ways to kill this character, this kid. And the kid, of course, there's Bill Castle right there with his big cigar, ever present, that cigar. And so Chrissy, or Mary Badham, her character says to Barnaby, if Uncle's trying to kill us, let's just kill him first. So that's what the movie is. It's like a cat and mouse game going back and forth, trying to kill each other in various ways.
I just recently saw this movie, and I did not know much about it. I knew it existed, but I had never seen it. It's on YouTube if anybody is interested. It's a great movie. I think it's really exciting. It's a great adventure for, especially I would have really liked it if I would have been around the age that you and Mary were in the film. But the ending is just like, the whole time I was watching it, I was like, oh, why don't I know what this movie is? Then the ending happened, and I was like, oh, that's why I don't know this movie. It was just a really bad ending. And
I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, don't you agree, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, resoundingly. There was a problem with Williams' relationship to Universal Studios because in his contract, he could pick out the stars of the movies, that he made there, as long as they were on the list. Universal had their own, contract players, and he wanted their players. And at the time, Nigel Green was on that list, and Mary Badham was on that list, and Linda Lawson, and the fellow that played the sheriff, the guy that shuttled me to the island. They were all on the Universal players list, and I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't was because when we did Now Miguel, while we were shooting the film, and back in LA, we were shooting in New Mexico, and in LA were looking at the trailer, the dailies, and they figured, oh well, maybe this kid can act, and so they sent along a 7-year contract for my dad to sign. So he signed it and said, oh, great, we got a contract. And in the meantime, we got a call from Fox asking me to go to Hollywood and take pictures with Guy Williams for another space TV show that was coming on. And we took a couple of pictures, and I wish I had them, with Guy Williams. And then my agent called us back. We went back to New Mexico. My agent called back, and she said, yeah, they want you to start in a few weeks. When are you guys going to be finished with this? Anyway, they negotiated the deal. But then my dad said to her, what about this deal with Universal Studios? Anyway, to make a long story short, Universal wasn't going to let me do Lost in Space because they had a 7-year contract with me, and Fox tried to negotiate borrowing me for the show. And they said, no, we've got other things in mind for him. And so I didn't get to do Lost in Space. Now, that's not to take anything away from Billy Mooney, who he is the quintessential, Will Robinson.
It's hard to imagine that show without him.
I can't either, to tell you the truth. I loved him in the show, and he's a nice guy, and he's a goofy kind of fella. He has a great sense of humor. And I'd met Angela Cartwright before, and she was really a doll. So I was pretty sad that we didn't get to do it. Also, it was, spaceships and traveling in space and so forth. What a great idea, So a year later, I think it was, we still hadn't done anything else with Universal. I spent half a year going to school there by myself, and in their schoolroom, and then I slipped out to not do that anymore, and went back to public school. And they didn't know, and they didn't seem to really care. And then I went on an interview for It's About Time. So I did it. It's About Time, and then they sued us. They said, you can't just jump out and do another show like that. And we went to court. And the judge asked me, he said, well, what do you think of this? Do you want to do the show, or do you want to stay with Universal? What's your own personal, I'm 14 years old at the time. I don't know what to say. I said, well, I don't know. They said, well, what about your mom? Does she think you should be there? Where's she? And I said, Mom doesn't have anything to do with my career. She didn't have anything to do with it. And the decision was made based on the fact that she hadn't signed the contract, that the contract was null. Both my parents would have had to sign it. And so essentially they lost, and they told my dad, your kid's done. He's never going to work in Hollywood again. Once he's done with that stupid show he's doing at CBS, he's finished. So my dad was like, okay, well, whatever. And after we finished It's About Time, I'd only done the pilot at that point. And they weren't going to let me do the series because of this Universal mess. And when we won, we went back to them and said, oh, no, we can do the series now. But before that happened, John Badham, who John Badham is, the director?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, Saturday Night Live and
Saturday Night Fever,
that's right, Saturday Night Fever.
The Fabulous Dracula from 1979
with Frank Langella. He made some really terrific films. I can't remember them all, but John was a great guy. He's also Mary's brother, and he called up because he saw Now Miguel and got me on the lot. Talked to me for 5 minutes. Called up Bill Castle and said, I've got Barnaby in my office right now. I'm bringing him to you now. And so I went to the office and I ran some lines with Bill. And he was like, yeah, you're it. And then they had to put off the film because Universal wouldn't let him hire me. So he fought them. And finally they said, bullshit, go ahead and do it. We don't give a fuck, excuse my French.
No, we say fuck on the show all the time. So.
Oh, okay. I'll try not to, though. I know some
you might hear worse.
So essentially what happened was I did do the movie, but they kept on giving Bill Castle a hard time about different aspects of it. And he would be asking for more money to do this or that. And can we have a little bit of different? They wouldn't give him anything. In fact, the amount of money that I was supposedly being held, I had been given was $20 million. As far as the character, he inherited $20 million. And one day, Lou Wasserman, the president of the studio, had a disagreement with Bill on the phone. And then Wasserman came down to the set. And as soon as he came down to the set, they cleared everybody off the soundstage so that they could talk alone on the soundstage. And they were, really having a pissing match out there. I was in the Beechcraft Bonanza airplane, just maybe 20 feet from them, which is where I would go to read because I loved that little airplane and it was on our set. In the film, you'll remember I'm in a plane with Uncle, and Chrissy has let all the fuel out of the, fuel tank. And then we start to do a nosedive because we've run out of fuel. So I'm always hanging out in that airplane, and I open up the little window wing that's on the side in that one, and I hear them barking back and forth. And the only thing I really heard clearly was Wasserman yelling back as he was leaving the set. He's yelling back and he's going, and change that $20 million to $5 million. For $20 million, I will fucking myself. So that was, they changed it to $5 million. So Bill acquiesced on that.
That's very cynical, but maybe an accurate observation.
Yeah, I guess.
Especially in
Sure.
67. After, Let's Kill Uncle and It's About Time, you had a couple other appearances. One of the things you did was an episode of The Invaders,
right?
Classic TV series.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. James Daly played my dad in that. The lady who played my mom, Ellis Thaxter. And again, wonderful people to work with. Mr. Finnis was, he was just normal. He was a quiet guy. He didn't go out of his way to be, the star or anything like that. He was just a normal guy. And so he was fun. I could talk to him. And the show, essentially that episode was about, my father was a 4-star general who finds out about the aliens and lures the aliens to a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Roy Thinnis is going to be up there for this meeting too. And in the meantime, he requisitions like a B-1 bomber or something to fly overhead and drop a bomb. So in order to stop him from doing that, they bring his wife and his son to that point where the folks are, and tells Daly, here you are, you're gonna drop a bomb on this meeting, and you're gonna kill your wife and your kid. And he just doesn't care. He says, no, I'm sorry, this is too big. We can't have this. These bad aliens, we have to blow them up. And so Thinnis asks the aliens to take care of it, and they do. So there's no problem in the end. But it was a fun show to work on. Actually, there were two men that hung out together. I can't remember their names right now, but one of them was in a lot of episodes of the show. And the whole time they stayed in character, both of them. And then they told me, they said, well, we're going to tell you a little secret. Most of the crew knows this, but just so that you understand why we're a little different. And I said, what's that? And they said, we are actually technical assistants from the universe. I'm like, you're aliens? Yeah, the two of us are aliens. And they wouldn't budge. I'm like, no, that can't be. You got a Screen Actors Guild card? Well, yeah, we do, but that we just made that happen. So
with their advanced technology,
yeah.
Now it would be a flatbed scanner that they would use to make something like that.
Yeah. Well, aliens, they can snap their fingers and get whatever they want.
Most of the things that you did before Horror High, you were a child actor in it, or at least you were younger. You were in your teens. I never would have recognized you. I don't know why, because Twisted. Well, I saw it as Twisted Brain.
Twisted Brain
on TV. And in fact, it was really hard for me for a long time to prove that it ran theatrically before there was like an internet archive of newspaper scans. Now you can find anything, but I just knew it as Twisted Brain, and it was sort of like this rite of passage for certain kids, because I know there were other kids in my school that talked about it. Like, did you watch Twisted Brain on TV? Like, we would talk about it and be like, oh my God, it was scary. Well, maybe we should do the ad gallery now, because there's some stuff that I want to talk about that's in the ad gallery. So why don't we look at some ads for Twisted Brain, Horror High, aka Twisted Brain. It opened in Irving, Texas, Thursday, September 20th, 1973. And this ad is really unique. This is not the Crown International run. This is when it was a brand new thing. Have you seen these before, Pat?
Yeah.
Okay, good. This is it ran in Texas. It was shot in Texas. Larry Stouffer directed it. And they just came up with these two ads. And these ads actually have a monster in it that looks like you in the film. I mean, this is obviously your makeup from the movie.
Right.
And here we have another run in November of 73 in Galveston with this unique ad. I love this. This is a screaming girl in front of a blackboard.
I never saw that one. Yeah.
And of course, a lot of the Dallas Cowboys are in it, and me, Joe Green. Crown International picked it up, and they opened it in March of '74 in Orlando. This is the one that everybody has seen. This poster. They ran it a lot. It played a lot of different cities. It took a while. For most of 1974, it circulated as horror. And this is interesting. Look at the tagline here. It mentions his twisted brain, which must be where they got the TV title from.
Maybe, yeah.
They ran it with another Crown International flick, Stanley. This one's great. Now, this ad, first of all, when you see Blood of Dracula's Castle and Nightmare in Wax, you know you're in for something special. And Horror High, like they made a reference to the acid burn, and they also mentioned a diseased rat, which I guess is your guinea pig, Mr. Mumps, in the film.
Right. He wasn't really diseased.
No. But that hyperbole that they go for in these ads. So this is the only place I ever saw an ad that used that technique.
Right.
But I don't know. To me, I guess that is your makeup from the movie, but to me, it doesn't really look that much like it. And there definitely is no woman in a bra in your movie.
No. And at the time, I probably would have wished there was.
A lot of people probably wished that. October '75, Fort Worth, Texas, it resurfaced with a new title, Kiss the Teacher Goodbye.
Right.
And, I know you have an interesting story about this one. But these are other Crown International pictures too, Trip with the Teacher and The Teacher.
Right.
And this is actually the title that most people probably saw this movie under. Here it is playing with Grizzly and Creature from Black Lake. I could just faint. It played for years under the title. Oh, here it is as Horror High again.
Yeah.
This was like after, towards the late '70s. May 1981, here it is with Final Exam, a really dismal slasher that's really not one of my favorites. But they dragged it out again in '81. Right. And finally, here's another one from '81, Kiss the Teacher Goodbye again. Yeah. Sexy teacher movies.
Yeah.
It totally isn't. But the final theatrical screening I could find was in March 1982 with Scared to Death, another fabulous one, and The Comeback, a Pete Walker film starring Jack Jones, of all folks. And so it played a lot in theaters, and probably many, many people saw this movie under different titles. Most of us saw it on TV, and here's the debut from April of 1976, the day before my birthday, 1976. They debuted it on TV.
Right.
And here it was used to sell a cable subscription. This is when it was on Chiller Theater in Pittsburgh, a long-running horror host show hosted by Bill Cardille, aka Chilly Billy. This is probably the first time I saw Twisted Brain, and I was 6 years old, and it just damaged me. I'm still recovering. January of '77, here it is. And this is great with House of Frankenstein and Dracula. How can you choose?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be interested to know from our viewers, when was the first time you saw Horror High, aka Twisted Brain? One of our viewers tonight, Nicole, she had a question for you that she sent to me on Twitter. She wants to know what your favorite William Castle film is and what your favorite '80s slasher is. So what would you say about that?
My favorite Bill Castle movie is 13 Ghosts. I've seen his other films, and they're all equally as good. I think that Let's Kill Uncle was probably pretty far down on his list because he had such a problem with the studio to get what he wanted. And I believe he left the film after the first cut. He couldn't really do anything with it because he didn't get the ending he wanted. None of us got the ending we wanted. And literally they just put us on the set and had us do this dumb ending. So in the book, it's a pretty amazing, dramatic end where Uncle chases Barnaby all the way up to the top of the hotel, which has kind of a steeple on it, and he's grabbing him by the foot. And as he does, the sheriff, shows up and fires a couple of shots, and Uncle falls into the pool with the shark. And that's the end of him. So that probably would have been a better climax. than what we got.
Absolutely.
Well, they made it innocuous. You know, they looked at it and said, "This is a kids' film. We can't have blood. We can't kill anybody in this film because it's just not for that audience." So so we lost out because of that.
What about your favorite 80s slasher? Were you into any of those movies back then?
I can't say I was.
You don't strike me as a slasher fan.
No, I may be a slasher, but I'm not a slasher fan.
You're definitely a creeper.
Yeah, and I'm a creeper. My kids still call me creeper. My daughter especially. You know, me teasing all the time. I would always tease the kids about different things. And what I teased my daughter about was all her good-looking friends. I mean, whether they were 12 years old or 15 or whatever, I would always, you know, they were always so nice to me. They were always, "Hi, Mr. Cardamone." They give me a big hug, that type of thing. And I always look at my daughter and raise my eyes like I'm a creeper, you know. And at one point, I think she was 17. I think, and I said, "Honey, now that you're 17, I'm really thinking about putting a swimming pool in the backyard because now all your friends can come over in their bikinis." And she was like, "Dad," she just a joke. And of course, my wife let me have it because of that one. You know, she's like, "You have to stop doing this." You know, at
We
one
kept you
point,
in line.
yeah, when she was 13, she stopped wanting to do Halloween with me. And my daughter and I did Halloween together every year. You know, I'd put a little something on, but she'd be all made up in some outfit, and I'd take her trick or treating with the boys. And after the boys went off to do their own thing on Halloween nights, it was just Patrice and I. And so when she was 13, I said, "What are we going to be this year, Patrice?" And she looked at me and she goes, "We're not going to be anything, Dad." And I was like, well, why? We're going to go out trick or treating, right? And she just looked up and went, "Mom, talk to him." And I said, "Oh, so this year you want to go out and hang with your friends and probably drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes or pot?" And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, we'll probably be too busy having sex." Well, that shut me up, you know. And my wife looked at me and she goes, "You taught her sarcasm. You know, that's your fault that she did that." But and
The
she was
apple
an
doesn't
actress
fall
for
far from the
a very
tree.
short while. She went to Pepperdine and studied acting. And I always told her she always wanted to be an actress. Growing up, she talked about how she wanted to be an actress like Dad. And Dad's got to help her get into film. So she studied theater. And in high school, she got nothing but leads. She got all the leads in the plays. And she was that girl in the theater class that everybody knew she was going to get the lead. She just did. And she was very good. So I told her, I said, "If you want to become an actress, you can, but you have to go to college first and study it. You have to get a degree, and you have to have minor in something else that you can, you know, use to to fund yourself in your acting career." And so she studied and studied, and she, you know, won prizes in college for her acting. And when they did their showcase, she was the only one out of the entire showcase that ended up with an agent at the end of the night. And the first part that she did, she called me up halfway through the night that she was shooting a night shot at a drive-in in her car. She had a 65 Mustang. And I think they hired her car more than they hired her. So it was a drive-in. And she called me halfway through the night. She said, "Dad, I'm not doing this anymore." And she became a teacher. And now she does flowers for weddings. So whatever. You know, I divert and talk about my kids because I'm proud of all of them. I love my kids dearly. And they're all successful in their own right, which is really cool.
And your son was in a pretty successful rock band too, called the
Joe. Yeah, Joe Cardamone.
No, not the Empress File. Sorry.
The Empress File. I wish he named it that. That's my favorite. One of my favorite films. Nigel Green and Michael Caine. Joe was in the Icarus line.
Icarus line.
Like Icarus and Daedalus, his dad, the wax wings, and he fell from the sky. So he was the Icarus line. He wrote the music and performed it with 4 guys from high school that he knew. And over the years, that changed a lot. But they traveled all over the world. They had record deals with different companies. And then his right-hand man, Alvin, got cancer and passed away when they were all, I guess, probably in their early 20s. And Joe just stopped the band right then. He didn't do anything for about a year. And then he rose from the ashes as Joe Cardamone. and now he's been a solo artist for years. He's actually in Ireland right now shooting music videos for an album that he just did with Mark Lanigan from Screaming Trees.
Yeah.
And a couple other bands that he was in. He's pretty well known. And Joe and he are, did an album together, and that's coming out pretty soon, or it's just about to come out.
He's doing what he loves, and that's great.
Yeah. My other son's making films, and he's also a gourmet cook. So they're doing fabulous.
They learned it from you, Pat.
No, they've gone beyond me. As a matter of fact, raising them, I was always telling them, don't do what I did. There's better ways of growing up. There's better ways of aging, and better ways of taking care of yourself. And that's what they did. Even Patrice, as much as she loved acting, she saw, gee, it was a dead end for Dad. So it could end up being a dead end for me. I'm going to do something else. And so she was happy with her decisions. And now she's a stay-at-home mom for the time being. She just had another baby. Well, he's 7 months old now, but wonderful for Jeanette and I. My wife and I, we live up in Sonoma now, where the babies are.
Dave, the Horror High VHS box you're talking about is the sequel, or not a sequel. It's called Return to Horror High, but it is not a sequel to tonight's movie. That's the box with the cheerleader skeleton.
They shot it as Horror High, and then when they found out that there was another film before that called Horror High, then they asked Crown if they didn't mind if they used the title Return to Horror High. But they had some pretty good people in that. George Clooney is one of the stars of it, and Marsha, she was one of the stars of it too.
Yeah, there were some great people in it. It just wasn't related to tonight's film.
No, it's not.
Unfortunately, my regular co-host Sam Panico is not with us tonight because he usually does the drink segment of the show. So I'm going to have to do it myself tonight, and I have a very, very special cocktail I'm going to make.
Oh, good.
It's going to transform this evening, definitely. Now, Sam posted a drink recipe on his Twitter feed, but the drink I'm going to make tonight is a little more basic because I ran out on a special errand today, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to go collect all the ingredients. So I'm just going to do a very simple Midori martini tonight, which is, however much vodka you want to use, probably about an ounce. But if you're a little more daring, make it a double pour if you like.
Yeah, 1 ounce, you're not going to taste it.
Right, exactly. I need something a little more substantial. And I got this brand new bottle of real Midori this week. I was so excited because of the pandemic, you couldn't get Midori in the Allegheny County area for a long time, maybe like 2 or 3 months.
Midori, did you hear that, children? Midori.
Don't try this at home, and definitely don't if you're underage. But anybody else, I encourage you to make one of these cocktails with me because they are delicious. And this is actually, I'm calling this Vernon's Potion. Because once you see the finished cocktail, you'll understand. Shake it up in some ice. And voila. Now, if this doesn't rock your twisted brain, I don't know what will. But the piece de resistance. I have to make sure I have my tongs ready. Because you cannot handle this volatile material with your bare hands. And here you have it. Vernon Potion.
Oh, boy. I don't have that final ingredient. That's a good ingredient. I like that. I don't have the final ingredient, but I have the potion right here.
You're ready to go. Don't transform because we're going to need to talk some more after the movie's over. So cheers to everybody, and cheers to you, Pat Cardi. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. I'm having a lot of fun. So thank you.
Cheers to everyone.
No, it's delicious. So one of the things that we can talk about, but I want to save some stuff to talk about after the movie, after we watch the film. But
Okay.
one of the things that we could talk about is that title change, to Kiss the Teacher Goodbye, which apparently you and the other folks involved with the making of the film had no idea that that was happening. Isn't that right?
People were calling me from all over the country, fans that I had back then, and friends, and even family in Australia called me to say, this movie that you were in, Horror High, it's not called that. It's called, Kiss the Teacher Goodbye, and and so that's how I found out that they were, distributing it under different names. So I don't think I ever got any residuals from Kiss the Teacher Goodbye. I don't even know if that actually played on TV. Did it?
Not under that title. It only played on TV under the title Twisted Brain. As far as I know.
When it was Horror High, I was actually studying film distribution. I was studying filmmaking in college, and I was putting very specific attention on distribution, and I saw all the different ways these little distribution companies screw producers out of their money. And I mean, it's the screwing of producers starts with the ticket taker. They'll put out a ticket that has nothing to do with the film just so that they can put the cash in their pocket. And they'll work with the guy taking the tickets. Anyway, it works all the way up to the point where by the time half of the money actually makes it to the distributor, then he takes his share off the top and sends you a letter saying, gee, I'm sorry, we didn't make anything this month. All the money was spent on prints and advertising. We're just losing, like the devil on this thing. So the distributor essentially never paid the producers anything for this film ever. In all these years, we've never gotten a dime out of it. And then as an actor, I had to fight to get my residuals from the film once it was on TV. So I was never really, I couldn't engage with the idea of raising money from people to make another film, knowing that there's a good chance they're never going to get their money back.
I've heard that story so many times from different actors who I had the pleasure of talking to. And it's a familiar story. They did work on this film, and it was only like, sometimes only a couple of weeks work, maybe only a couple of days sometimes. And the film still lives, but they never saw any money from it.
Oh, film distribution is a license to steal. They cook the books. And, if they get audited, then instead of being audited, they'll offer you something in return. But you really have to, lawyers have to come in. They have to see that audit walking in the door before they go, okay, wait a minute. We got a set of books for you. I suggested to them that we distribute the film ourselves. And they said, oh, that's a good idea. It sounds like it's hard, but you think we can do it? I said, yeah, there's sub-distributors all over the Midwest. We just have to get in touch with them, let them know we have the film, and they'll put it in the mix with their films. And we'll get our money back that way. And so they were like, okay, let's do it. And they got in touch with a sub-distributor, and they made 10 prints of the film just for the drive-in and local theater market in Texas and the Panhandle region, which is Oklahoma and whatever else. And so those 10 prints went out. It was advertised. We thought it was getting a good reaction because we were driving around to different theaters and looking to see what the crowds were like, and they were coming to the film. And then it played for 2 weeks, I think, at those theaters. Then we had it booked into another set of theaters, but we never got the prints back. And then we found out that the film was not playing in the theaters we booked it into. It was playing in other theaters in other states that we didn't even have a sub-distributor in. And the prints never came back. So we never got any money, and I lost all my credibility right there. So when it came time to sign a distributor up for Horror High in Los Angeles, they let me take it around, but they wanted to negotiate the deal themselves. So I, versed them in all the different ways they were going to get screwed. And they just ignored all that and signed this deal, which basically gave adoption papers to the distributor.
That's unfortunate.
I also called like 16 other producers who had films with them, independent films with them. And they all had the same story. Nobody got any money. The only ones that got money were contract players at Crown International. Oops, did I say the name Crown International?
You did, but if it's true, say it.
Yeah, well, the principals that were involved in the company back then are all gone now. They've all passed away, and now I think it's just run by a bunch of lawyers and maybe friends or family or something. But nobody will answer the phone to me, of course. So
Don't answer the phone.
yeah.
So there's some more stuff that we can talk about on the second segment, including your co-stars in Horror High, which I'm dying to hear about. But for now, why don't we get to the movie?
Sounds great.
So thanks to everybody for joining us. We hope you'll come back for the second segment. And make sure you think of some questions for Pat and have them ready to go in the chat when we come back after watching Horror High on the Drive-In Asylum double feature. We'll see you then.
Your time warp to another dimension of fantastic films. Drive-In Asylum, an independent, print-only fanzine bringing you back to the films of the drive-in and grindhouse era, presenting interviews with the actors and filmmakers who unleash these warped classics, commentary and reviews written by fanatics like you, and that retro newsprint vibe you've been missing. Our latest issue features interviews with Candace Hillegas of Carnival of Souls and Curse of the Living Corpse, underground filmmaker John Moritsugu, and Italian actor Giovanni Lombardo Radici. Coming soon in October's issue, Pat Cardi from Horror High. Drive-In Asylum is also obsessed with vintage newsprint movie ads, presenting galleries of advertisements for films that once confronted newspaper readers with images of the lurid, the sensational, the bizarre. These ad mats are right here back on paper the way they were meant to be seen, waiting for you. Order from Etsy shop Groovy Doom or visit Forbidden Planet in New York City to pick up Drive-In Asylum, your fantastic film connection. To avoid fading, keep repeating. It's only a fanzine, only a fanzine, only a fanzine, only a fanzine.
Welcome back to the Drive-In Asylum double feature, and as you saw in our promo there, the next issue is going to feature Pat Cardi from Horror High, and we just happen to have him on the show tonight. So welcome back, Pat.
Hey, thank you.
Now that all the viewers have seen the film, I know there were some people that hadn't seen it before, including Sean Midas. I think tonight was the first time he ever watched it. So now we can talk about all the spoilerish stuff that happened in Horror High, which has a very downbeat ending. The first time I saw this, I'm not sure I expected Vernon to actually die.
Now, I wanted them to have Vernon go back to being Vernon right at that ending shot. I wanted it to be just, I thought it would have a little bit more empathy from the viewers if they saw that he was, even though he had been a monster, he was still just a boy. But I got voted down. We probably just didn't have time.
So, some fabulous co-stars that you had in this movie. You got to work with Austin Stoker, which
Austin was great. He and I are still great friends. We do autograph shows together. And he's a wonderful actor. Of course, Precinct 13.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a great guy. He just says the very next thing I was in after Horror High was Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and I played a chimpanzee, and I was in a scene with Austin and Nat. He had no idea I was there because I was done up as a chimpanzee. I walked up to him and I said, "Officer Bozeman," and he like looked around. I said, "Did you ever get Vernon? Did you ever get Vernon?" That's me with Paul Williams.
You're obviously the taller one.
Yeah. I asked for that job. I went to the casting director, Ross Brown, over at Fox. I had lunch with him one day and I said, "Do you have anything going on? I did this horror film way back in May and nothing in between. Do you have anything? I can just like be a background character." And he goes, No. He says, I don't have anything like that for you. I said, "Well, you got this apes film." I said, put some monkey makeup on me and I'll just be one of the apes. And he thought about it for a minute and then he introduced me to the producer of it and they talked for a couple of minutes. He said, "Sure, yeah, we'll put you on." They put me on for the duration of the picture. And basically I had just like one or two lines in one scene, but I was there every day in makeup for the rest of the film.
How long did that makeup take to put on?
It was quite lengthy. We got there at 3:30 in the morning and we didn't get the first shot in till about 10 o'clock. So, and there were lots of apes. I was out at the ranch most of the time. A lot of ape makeup. It was very quiet, at first. People didn't, they were just courteous and so forth. But then halfway through the makeup, they would stop and have breakfast. So we'd all have these white appliances on our face and the muzzle, the nose muscle, and but no chin on, and so that we could still eat. Because once the chin goes on, it's hard to eat anything without ruining the makeup. But later in the day, when we were all, it was just like you're silly. You just talk to anybody and make fun of the way they look, and well, within a couple of days, then I noticed that all the chimpanzees were hanging around with the chimpanzees. All the gorillas were hanging around with the gorillas. All the orangutans were hanging out with the orangutans. And we kind of segregated each group. And then after a couple of days, we saw the gorillas making fun of the chimpanzees and starting to have like little battles going on between them, not physical battles, but words and pushing and stuff like that. And the orangutans coming in and splitting them up and saying, "Hey, let's calm it down here. We have to work." So I thought that was a good social experiment, if nothing else. And the first day I met Claude Akins, and we were talking. Claude was he was the main gorilla guy. He was like the head of the police, type of guy, a real bully. But Claude taught me. He said, "Let's go look at a mirror together." And we went and looked at a mirror together. And he said, "Now watch me." And he started making all these faces. And so I started doing the same thing. He goes, "That's all there is to it, man. Just make faces." He goes, "Just try to make an angry face. And if it doesn't look angry, then contort your mouth more and make it look more like it. Do something with your eyes." And so I was prepared to do some good stuff. But after I saw what I did on the film, I was sort of like talking through a mask that didn't move. I guess I really didn't get it anyway.
Eldon Glenn, after they smashed up Mr. Mumps, he went on to become a piece of winter apparel and was therefore known as Mr. Muffler. So that's
I used to wear him on my ears.
That's what happened to him. Sorry to tell you.
Yeah, the cat was never hurt, so they gave it something that would put it to sleep for a while. And we had a stack of furniture pads right where I dropped the cat. So I don't think you ever see the cat actually hit the ground, or if you do, I don't know how that works. But when I dropped the cat out of my hands, it dropped on furny pads. And it was a rescue pet. And the makeup girl on the show, she kept him, and she had him for years.
I'm glad you clarified that, because that was one of the most traumatic things about watching that movie. The acid face was traumatic, but in a different way. That was something that I always wanted to see. But the dead cat really freaked me out. So,
right.
Because
you were the one that put the warnings up.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, I was 6 years old the first time I saw that. So
oh my gosh! Yeah, you would be worried about the cat then. Yeah.
And I'm a cat man myself.
I am too.
I wanted to ask you about Rosie Holitik. He was married to the producer. Was it James Graham?
Yes, James P. Graham. James had I think a couple of years before that, he had graduated from Texas A&M. He was a football player there, and he studied oil, and he studied oil business.
Mhm.
And about the time we were doing the picture, he was starting his company, Palo Petroleum, which was an exploration company. And they almost went broke until they hit in, they actually struck oil in one of the largest oil reserves in northern Texas, northwest Texas. And from there, he became a billionaire. It was just phenomenal for him. But he was dating Rosie, and all she was interested in was being in movies. And he made a deal with her. He said, you marry me and I will make you a movie star. He just figured he's going to make enough money to do that, you know. And so they did 2 pictures. What was the other one? Don't Look in the Basement? Is that what it was?
Yeah, the other one she was in was that everybody knows her for is Don't Look in the Basement. I'm not sure if Jimmy Graham produced that or not, but
I know he found the money for it.
oh, okay, well there you go.
I think Larry directed it, but I'm not sure. It might have been somebody else.
SF Brownrigg directed it.
Okay. I don't know who else from our project was on that, but I had never seen it before. Anyway, here's the makeup lady. She was the one that took the cat, and like the rest of the crew, she was just, you know, a normal person, great to be around.
With gray hair.
Jack standing behind me, he was the special effects makeup guy on the show, and he wouldn't agree to do a prosthetic for the piece. They just put it all on my face directly. So we did what we did without the money. It's my favorite scene in the movie.
I bet it was.
to kiss the beautiful Rosie Holotic, and she was a very nice girl, very nice lady. It was fun working with her. And yes, her husband was there while we were shooting that.
This makeup, you don't really see it all that well in the film.
Right.
And there's beefy John Nyland. He is a side of beef. Look at him.
John was a great guy, and John brought me home with him to help teach him how to act. And we spent the weekend there getting stoned and drinking and jumping in the hot tub with all the cheerleaders. Those were the days. And this is the morning that I realized, oh my God, something bad happened. I'll have to stop drinking that stuff.
That freaked me out too, the idea of having clothes on in bed. Oh yeah, here's that cocktail I made earlier, and it was
right.
delicious. I might make another one.
There you go. There's the director, Larry. Larry's gone now. He passed away last year. And Jim Graham, also the producer, passed away too. But here we are working on the scene where Nyland's having to read the lines over and over again because he can't remember them, which is how I am now. She was one of the producers of the film. She was just a very nice lady. Drove me around places and stuff. Her husband didn't much like me. I don't know why.
She had giant lapels too.
She had good lapels. This is kind of an iconic scene for the picture. I really like this picture.
Do you? I mean, are you happy that you were in this movie?
Yeah, I am now. I mean, I was then too. My concept of this film is this is my version of I was a teenage werewolf, and I'm going to be the next Michael Landon. You know,
I talked to a lot of people who have been in movies, low budget independent films, and you know, sometimes they're not all that happy about it, and they kind of look back on it as, or at the time at least, they saw it as something that, you know, was a little embarrassing that they didn't want to talk about. I think these movies have a life of their own.
Celebrity shows in Hollywood do pretty good.
Yeah,
They have a lot of folks that have been in some of those older pictures. Like, you know, I mean, I was to one in Burbank. And Angie Dickinson and Tony Curtis. I can't remember, but a whole bunch of stars were there. There were people that you would think, why would they go to one of these conventions and sign autographs for money? They're probably rich, you know. They're too big to be doing this, but there they were doing it. And by the way, I grew up next door to Angie Dickinson's mom. And so my mom and Angie were friends for years and years before my mom passed away.
Oh my God. Policewoman herself.
She's amazing. She was just an amazing, nice person. Kind of crazy. You know, she got pissed off. Words came out. But she told us stories about the Rat Pack. She was like one of those unofficial members of the Rat Pack. She was like the woman of the Rat Pack. And she used to tell us stories about Frank and all the cats she hung out with. She was pretty neat. Anyway, back on subject.
Mean Joe Green is in this movie too, and he's from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he was actually pretty easy to get along with. I mean, he didn't talk a lot. He was kind of quiet, but there were a couple of days where all the guys that were in this, it was like Craig Norton, Calvin Hill, D.D. Lewis, Abner Haynes from the Kansas City Chiefs, Roger Nyland, of course, from Dallas, and these are the guys who put up the money for the film, and Joe Green. And when Joe did that scene where he fires the gun that kills Vernon in the end, he actually, hey, Gene Kroll. Anyway, so tripped in the grass. He didn't like slide in to do a shot. It was a mistake. And the gun went off unwittingly. And then he was so pissed at himself that he stood up and started yelling, obscenities, and literally smashed the rifle against the wall. So they had to tape it back together and convince him that looked better than anything they had planned. And so finally he was good with it, and he got up and he did one more take where he was just pointing the gun at me and firing it. And he was happy that we were happy in any case. And after I got hit so many times with the different things that they were hitting me with, not breaking and just sort of knocking me out cold.
The breakaway glass didn't work, and neither did the cricket mallet.
Right. The breakaway glass that did work was jumping through the window. And the reason that worked was because I told them, you have to get somebody else to do that. I'm not jumping through that window. After everything else that's happened on this picture, I'm not jumping through the window. And so they got somebody else to dress up like me, and he jumped through the window, and it worked fine.
I always thought if somebody hits you really hard over the head and you pass out, you're dead.
No, actually, it was sort of both times. It was sort of like, have you ever been in a situation where all of a sudden, have you ever passed out ever?
Not really. I don't think so.
Do you know, like sometimes if you get up too fast, you sort of get a little dizzy and
yeah,
it's like that, but only it goes deeper. You can't come back from it. You just keep on going down the hole, and you can hear people talking, but you can't tell what they're saying exactly, and your vision goes down to like narrow vision. It's pretty much the way Daffy Duck does it in the movies with the stars going around his head.
I've never passed out, but the night's still young, so you never know.
Yeah, well, I passed out a few times on that one.
There were other football players. The Dallas Cowboys were in this. They were all they really had to do was that one scene in the locker room, though, right?
They had one in the locker room, and then when they were chasing me up the hall.
Oh, right, yeah, that too.
Yeah, and they were happy with it. I think they each put up like $10,000. Now, my contention has always been that Crown didn't pay back the production company, which was Horror High Limited. But something else came up recently where somebody from Dallas was telling me, well, that back then film and horse racing both were things that you could write off. They were things that needed investment in. They needed more investment in horse races for whatever reason, or maybe politicians wanted to write off their debts, so that became a debt instead of a bad expenditure. It's a shelter. That's what I was trying to get to. So filmmaking was a tax shelter, and there's a chance that over the years they wrote off probably more than they actually spent. So in that way, they get to put money into film. They got to be in the film and be around it and enjoy that, and got paid for it too.
Yeah, those are some of the most.
They weren't hoping to get a profit in any case.
Those are some of the most elusive, obscure films. There's a couple of them that I can think of off the top of my head that were purchased by. They were made by independent filmmakers, and they got a very limited run. There's this movie called Corpse Eaters. It's like a zombie movie from Canada, and this guy made it. He owned a drive-in, and he made it to show at his drive-in. And it was a huge success. Like he screened it in his drive-in, and there were lines like for miles of people trying to get in. And then someone came along and bought it for a tax shelter and just shelved it and never released it. And it's still languishing like somewhere in legal limbo. So I'm glad that didn't really happen to Horror High. At least we've seen the film and we've enjoyed it all these years, and it's really amassed a cult following. You told me during the break that there was a sequel that was penned for Horror High. Larry wrote another sequel
which was very similar to the first movie. But it was a different kid. It wasn't, I think, yeah, his name was still Vernon, but it was just, there were different scenes and there were different actions that took place. In the one that we did, Vernon got shot. One guy just shoots him and he dies with a pistol. And so I suggested to them, this guy's killed all these people. I mean, all the guns have to go off. You have to throw a hand grenade at him to kill him. You just have a guy walk up and boom, he's down. And so they agreed, and that's how we got the scene with Mean Joe Green, slipping and falling with the big gun blast, and all the cops firing multiple gun shots at him. And it's a shame that it was shot at night in 16, because you can't see all the squibs that were going off, because I had all these bullet squibs going off, and it was pretty gruesome, but that's the way it is. So I wrote a new scene for the new one where the Vernon character literally spikes the punch at a Halloween party over on the football field, and all the football players drink the punch, and all of a sudden you've got chaos going on. They're going in and out of the building. They're chasing each other. The guys are chasing the girls. The girls are going nuts. Even some of them have been drinking the punch, and they're all turning into the, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde character. And then you have the school on fire, and Vernon, the monster, fighting with the head of the football team on top of the school, and the whole thing caves in and they fall inside the building. And you've got the police outside with hoses trying to, get the monsters off of the fence and shooting guns at them and stuff. And then the next morning, of course, there's nothing but dead bodies everywhere, and the police and investigators and the fire department, and while they're investigating this and trying to figure out what happened, the cop that was sort of on to Vernon all along is saying, "I can't believe it. I think we got him. I think he was just in this mess." And then they hear Vernon's little bicycle bell go off, and turn around, and there's Vernon on his bike, and they're like, no, he had to have, and everybody's saying, no, look, if he was there, he wouldn't look so clean, and pretty much he just gets away with it.
I'm getting the chills just hearing this. It's almost as good as actually seeing it.
I wish we could do it. I'll tell you, I wish we could do it. If I could raise money for a film, I would probably do it. But, after working in films that never made a dime, and I produced a couple of things myself, I could not steal money from people like that ever again. I'd have to do it out of my own back pocket, which means I'd have to shoot it with my iPhone. So I don't think I could do the kind of job that it would take to make it really work.
If you could find a way to make it found footage, the Blair Witch Project and
yeah,
Paranormal Activity.
I've been writing scripts since I was 12 years old, and I haven't done one yet that could be made for $50,000.
You got big ideas, Pat.
I guess I just see it that way, but oh well, maybe my kids will do it. Both my kids are into filmmaking, so maybe they'll do it. I call them kids; they're adults. They're in their 40s.
They're always your kids.
Yeah, they are.
I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight, because it's been a real pleasure having you on. And
very cool.
Watching the movie with you was just really exciting, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
So anyway, I am on Facebook. Facebook is Pat Cardi. I also have a sub-site called Theaterama. But if anybody, wants to say hi, I'm on Facebook.
Right on. Yeah, you're a super nice guy, and I thank you for having the time to hang out with us tonight.
If there's anybody out there who has the money to make Horror High 2, I'm on Facebook.
It's real easy to get in touch with him, and he's eager to do it. Reach out.
Hey guys,
maybe we can get a Kickstarter.
Maybe a Kickstarter. I don't know. I see a lot of comments on there, people thanking us for this thing that we've done here tonight, and also saying very nice things about my acting career and films I've been in. And I just want to thank you for doing that. And feel free to write me at Facebook, and if I can, I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can.
Michelle looks like someone you might know.
Michelle Falern?
Michelle Cardamone.
Oh, that's my sister. Hi, Michelle.
I
It's so
thought
cool
you
that
might.
you're watching this. Thanks. I love her. She's my sis.
Pat, thanks very much for hanging out with us, and have a good night. And don't drink anything green, okay? Because
All right.
you don't handle it well. I'm telling you. All right, have a good night.
Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian. Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian.